I think my biggest thing that my parents did for me that I tell parents if they're asking me for input or anything on having a kid with limb difference is, don't underestimate what they're capable of.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bolland, and today I'm joined by somebody that's probably the closest to me of anybody I've ever had on the We're Not Stumped podcast, and that's Alexia Michitti. She's a speaker, athlete, founder of Embrace, which is an adaptive clothing brand for people with limb difference. She was the first ever recipient of the Golden Glove at the Women's Amputee World Cup. She's turned her limb difference into her superpower. From the soccer field to the stage, she shines by displaying resilience and leadership. Alexia, thank you so much for being a guest on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited for our conversation today.
I know, because we do have a lot in common.
Yes.
We're both missing right hands. We're both born without a right hand. Yeah,
Yep.
and actually they look quite a bit similar. It's kind of interesting. You're definitely the closest I've ever had on the podcast. We always start the podcast with a segment I call In Your Own Words. So I'd love the listeners to learn more about you.
Yeah. So I am 21 years old. I'm almost 22, 2 more weeks. I was born without my right hand. My parents didn't know that I was going to be born like this, and I'm sure we'll get into more about that in a little bit. I just graduated from college in May. I'm now working full time for myself. I am a public speaker, so I host assemblies at schools, and I have spoken at some keynote events and other nonprofits and stuff like that. And I also started Embrace. I started it my junior year of college, and I since then have been able to publish a patent for the clothing designs that I have released. I also recently, as you mentioned, went to the first ever Women's Amputee Soccer World Cup, representing the U.S. with the women's amputee national team. We were able to place in second place, so we got silver medals there and win the Golden Glove, which was an honor. And I've been able to make a lot of really amazing connections in this community that I didn't necessarily know since I was introduced to this community. I guess technically my freshman year of college, but my first year meeting other people that looked like me was in high school. So yeah, it's a little bit
Yeah.
about me.
Well, it's always interesting because, like you, I didn't know a lot of people like me. And, the more I get involved with the community, the more I really like it. So you were saying earlier that one of the first things you said was when you were born, your parents were unaware that you were going to be born with one hand. So how was that for them?
Yeah, so I mean, I was my parents' first kid. I think a lot of parents, they didn't say this outright, but you want your first kid to be like perfect and healthy and everything, and I was born in 2003, and you'd think technology would have been moving along a little bit more, but it wasn't. And my limb difference did not pop up in any ultrasounds or scans or anything like that. You can see my left hand like in the side shot, but you can't see my right hand. um, just because 'cause they're like, "Oh, it's blocked," whatever,
Hmm.
but I always tell people, when I was born, my parents had 2, options. They could either baby me and feel bad for me, or they could just say, "Hey, you have 1 hand, this is what it is. We can't control it, but we can control how we, create opportunities for you in life and push you to become the best," and they picked the second option, and I had to do the therapy for the first, like, 2 years of life, but, like, I didn't need the therapy, like, things like that. But, yeah, so my parents had no idea. I have a younger sister, she has both of her hands and no other, developmental issues or anything, so, yeah.
And I can't remember, we did talk a little bit. I want to know about prosthetics. Did you experiment with prosthetics for a little bit there?
Yeah, so I went to Shriners Hospital in Massachusetts for my first prosthetic when I was in first grade. It was a body-powered one. I think you have one behind you.
I do. Yeah.
And so, like, I had to reach out and it'd close and pull back and it'd open. It was ridiculous. But when I was appreciative of it, but it was, a lot. When I got to second grade, moving into third grade, I got my first myoelectric prosthetic, so I could open and close the hand like this. I spent like a week in Philadelphia getting this prosthetic, brought it home, and I was like, I can do my life better without it. But I still used it to an extent, not every single day, like for a full day's worth, but I'd use it every day for like periods of time. And then when I got to 8th grade, I had realized that I was really falling behind physically in soccer and basketball, and I was getting thrown around the field a lot by these players that were like, I don't know what they were doing. They were very strong and they were all girls too. And so I was like, I need to make a change. So I got my first activity specific prosthetic from there, just like a simple one, and now I have a pretty heavy duty one that I use every day at the gym for weightlifting, and I think I'm a lot stronger than I was then, so, yeah.
How was the myoelectric? I've never, those came around after I made my decision to not have a prosthetic.
It was good, it was very heavy, so I think it was like 10 or 11 when I got that, and, it's just forearm muscle, right? So this arm barely ever was getting used, but, not to a
Sure.
point where muscle development was, like, really there, I'm 10. So it was getting really heavy, but it was cool when I had it, but I just was so used to doing life without it, I was born like this, I didn't lose my hand, so,
Hmm.
um, it was cool, but at the same time, it was very limited for what it could do, so, yeah.
And I know that you said you played basketball and certainly soccer. Of course, you're a superstar in soccer. So not having the prosthetic, as you were kind of talking about earlier, kind of helped you in those sports.
Yeah, so my friend group at school, we all played basketball, growing up, and I didn't use a prosthetic or anything for basketball. I just naturally figured it out. But it's same for soccer, you don't really need a prosthetic or anything for soccer. We did think about at one point for like doing throw-ins and stuff like that, but it just wasn't necessary. So yeah.
I have a question because I saw some of your highlights. I'll admit I was watching some of your highlights there. It was fun watching it. And one of the ones in particular, you had a save in a game, and I don't know which game it was. I apologize for that. But you had your arm like tucked under your shirt. Is that like a rule within the amputee soccer?
Yep, okay, this is good. So, yes, so one of the rules for amputee soccer is that the goalkeepers have to have their arms tucked inside of their shirt, taped to their body if possible or needed. So, because my arm is so long, same length as you,
Yeah.
you have to have your arm, like, underneath, like, some people have it across their chest like this, or you could have it, like, underneath, whatever you need or prefer. And you have it taped to your body under your jersey, and it's like when I first started doing it, I was like, "I hate this," but it's to provide your arm giving natural reflex because that would be considered a handball in amputee soccer. So,
Oh,
having the one arm only available is what causes it to be equal because the field players can only use their one full leg that they have.
okay.
And so their forearm crutches, if the ball hits the crutches, it could be a handball, and if it hits the residual limit, can also be considered a handball. So they only have the one full leg, and then the goalkeepers only have their one full arm. So the highlights you were probably seeing from the World Cup, the quarterfinals against England, the semifinals against Poland, and the World Cup final against Colombia all went into penalty kicks. That never happens in soccer. I don't know of ever hearing games at that level that all end up in penalty kicks. It was very stressful for me because
I
I was a
bet.
goalkeeper. And I was always on the other side of the ball, taking the penalty kicks. I never went first, but I was always second or third for my team. And I really had to like dig down. We practiced some in practice, but it's not game setting. And I would never really have been a practice player. So it was very stressful. I had 15 shots. I only had 4 goals scored on me, one of them being the World Cup winning goal, for Colombia. But yeah, so
Well, thank you for that explanation. I wasn't sure why you had to do that, but it makes perfect sense now. And I want to remind everyone who I'm talking to. I'm talking to Alexia Michitti. She can be found, even though we haven't talked about this yet, but we will. She can be found at Embrace, but it's em13race.com. That's adaptive clothing. Please go check it out. And if you want to hear any other episodes of the We're Not Stumped podcast, you can find us at we'renotstumped.com. And just because Alexia and me were born without right hands, there's other people that have been on the podcast. So if you're a lower limb by some kind of accident or medical, we have all of that in segments and episodes all listed out separately on we'renotstumped.com. But I want to go back to what you were talking about, like go in your chronological order as far as your age, I guess. Like going to school for the first time for you. What was that like going to elementary school, if you can remember back that far?
Yeah, so my mom she is an elementary school teacher at the school I attended, which
Okay.
I think that did help me a little bit, there was a book, you may know it, it was called Harry, Willie, and Carrot Head,
Hmm.
and it was, some people do, some people don't. It was about a boy, Harry, he had 1 arm, same length as you and me,
Wow.
uh, and, just a character in the book that had a limb difference, and, every single year of school, my teacher would read that book within the first week of school, and then, like, sometimes kids would ask questions if they wanted at the moment, but I remember the first night of every year of school, literally until I graduated high school, my parents, would sit like, the first when I was younger, my parents would say, "What happened to your hand?" And I would say, "I was born like that, but I can do everything you can do." And every single night before the first day of school, my parents would ask me that, and, as I got older, it'd just be in passing, like, "What happened to your hand?" And I would just say, "I was born like that, but I can do everything you can do." And, it just kinda became a routine. Obviously, people had their comments and kind and not so kind words to say to me no matter
Yeah.
how I addressed it, but, yeah, I was very fortunate enough, though, to have accepting people mostly throughout my time in school and supportive friends as well. They played basketball with me, and there were some situations where they voiced their opinions where I would not have, and they did for me, and I really appreciate that, and I'm still friends with them all
That's
today, and yeah.
that's great. And that was consistent like through junior high and high school as well.
Yep. Yes, it
Really good.
was.
How about, so let's say now you're 16 years old, and I don't know if you got a job when you were 16 or if you tried, but was that something you tried to do, get a job, doing just some kind of work and earning some extra cash?
Yes, so my dad owns a pizza place, so I was working for him. I traveled a lot for soccer on the weekends, and I had practices and stuff during the week, so it was harder to get employment from like somewhere like Target or something because I had such a crazy schedule, but I worked when I could, which was a couple times a week at the pizza place. I would do prep in the morning at like 5 o'clock, 5:30. I would tie garlic knots, prep wings, make all the salads, get the dough ready for the day. But it was I did the job for a couple years, but I
How
liked
cool is
it.
that? Does your dad still own that a pizza place? I guess it wouldn't be the same one.
Yes, he still owns the same one.
Oh, he does.
It's a 25-year anniversary actually this year. So, yeah,
And where's
super.
that located?
It's in upstate New York. It's in the Binghamton area.
Okay, you can say the name if you'd like, because everybody's up. You got to go check it out.
It's called New York Pizzeria. It's in Binghamton, New York.
Whoa, wish I was there. I'll tell you what, it sounds good. And by the way, I remember you telling me how you first started doing those garlic knots, and you got to be about as fast as anyone else with just one hand.
Yeah, some of the other prep workers, like, they would try and race me, but it was like, I'm like, "Stop trying, like, it's not gonna work." But, yeah, it was fun. It was good.
So, so you go through that part of your life, then you go to college. And what was college life for you?
College, my first year was probably as rough as I've ever had it with my hand. I didn't really say that much when it was happening. You just want to say everything's fine and dandy, but it wasn't. I remember my first 2, 3 weeks of school, it was like 90 degrees, and I was wearing sweatshirts to cover my arm in this heat because I was so tired of people staring at me or whatever they were doing at 20 years old, like grow up. But it was hard. I was playing college soccer at the time, at the school I was at. I personally didn't feel very accepted from my coach. She
Hmm.
had some stronger words of choice about how I looked. But
Really?
yeah,
Anything you can share if you don't mind, or you don't have to.
I was
You don't
told
have to.
some of the comments just were like very out of context. I went in for a player meeting and basically was told the only reason I had been successful was because I had one hand, which I thought was not appropriate for
Hmm.
the conversation that was supposed to be had.
Yeah.
But, I didn't address it to her. I just kinda, like, walked away, and when I had got out of the meeting, my parents knew that I was in that meeting, it was just a, routine player check-in, and they were like, "How was your meeting?" And I said what had happened, and they're like, "Why were you talking about that?" I'm like, "I don't know." But, yeah, so by the end of that year, I'm the type of person that plans 10 years in advance, and at the end of that school year, I didn't know if I was gonna be returning. I will say, though, that even though I did have my rough moments at that school, I did have some incredible opportunities open up, one of them being, introduced to amputee soccer, another one of them being, my mentor. He since has passed away, unexpectedly my sophomore year, we lost him. But I was introduced to him, and uh, that he has been able to open almost all of the doors that I have now, because of him, and I met him at that school. So, yeah.
I was going
But
to ask you how you got introduced to the amputee soccer. So it was while you're at school, and how did that all come about?
yeah, so I started school as a sports media major, and my professor had assigned everyone to interview someone in the sports field of their choice, whoever it was. But she told me that I had to interview this guy. His name was Eli Wolf. It was still on Zoom because of COVID. It was 2021 at this point in the fall, and I interviewed him in September. And he since since I had talked to him, he said, "There's this thing called amputee soccer. Reach back out if you're interested." And I said, "Okay," like, but I ignored it because I was in the middle of my soccer season, at other school, whatever. And then in December, I was actually thinking about quitting soccer, like, from the team, and I had opened my email, like, it was literally 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had seen that he had emailed me earlier that day and said, "Hey, December is US Disability Soccer Awareness Month. We'd love for you to come and speak as a student athlete in college with a disability. You're talking for 5 minutes about what it's like to be in college with a disability." And I was like, okay, like, maybe there's a reason to hold on to this. So I stuck it out. I spoke at the event in December, and I was reached out to literally as I was speaking from the president of US Amputee Soccer to come try out amputee soccer. And after that call, I also started working for the US Disability Soccer. It was like a program. It's called Adapt and Thrive, and it was young people under 30, and they had a representative of each disability soccer categories, and we all met like once or twice a month to work on initiatives towards building US disability soccer. And
Oh,
it was a
very
long
nice.
story, but yeah.
I'm sorry?
I said it's kind of a long story, but you
No,
know,
I really wanted to hear, and I also want to hear because I saw some of the highlights. Like I said, what are some of your most fondest memories, or the moment you look back on and you feel pretty good about in your soccer career?
one of the big ones that for amputee soccer or just in general.
Just in general.
Okay, so I think w the moment like, I felt like, "Ooh," like, I think I did it. Um, obviously, when we were in the World Cup final, we lost the game, and I was quite emotional after the game. Probably not much class if you watch the tapes back, but, I remember being there and, you know, there was, I think, 10 teams in the tournament, and I think every team was cheering for USA except for the 2 other teams from South America. They may have been cheering for us, but it was pretty clear, like, who was cheering for who at the final. And, after the game, the other goalkeeper for our team, she's also from the area that I'm from, and I had connected with her when I was in high school, and I ran up to her. She was practicing on the field next to me, and I had been begging her all these years to try playing amputee soccer, and she finally tried it out and was there as my teammate at the World Cup final. And I remember looking at her, and she was crying because she was happy for me that I had won the Golden Glove, but I was crying because I knew that I was able to have a moment like that with one of my teammates, not just a teammate, but a mentee that I was able to, like, live that dream with.
Wow.
So I think that, and I talk about that at schools too, like, you don't know, what kind of impact you can have on someone and what kind of opportunity. And that was kind of like, you did it, like you're here with someone that you wanted to create this opportunity with. Um, and even after that game, I was there probably for 45 minutes, taking pictures, signing autographs, which was super cool with fans and like little kids. Some of them were missing their arm or their leg, and
Yeah.
just being able to connect with them in that moment, I never thought that moment would ever come true. So it was super cool.
And you were talking about speaking, you've talked a couple times about it. One time, very early on, I guess. I didn't know you had done that earlier, but I know you do it now. And how did you start in that? And I'm going to ask two questions. How do people get a hold of you if they want to learn more?
Yeah. So if people want to get a hold of me, on the Embrace website, there's a section called Book Alexia Today or something like that along those lines. And you can schedule a free consultation to meet with me, have a phone call, go in more detail if you're interested. I am booking for this year if anyone is interested in having me. Um, but I got involved with speaking because in high school, I was working towards my gold award for Girl Scouts,
Oh,
which is the equivalent of an Eagle Scout. I ended up winning the National Gold Award, which was a step higher. You have to
wow.
get selected to win or receive that. But for my project, I focused on character education traits, so hard work, determination, skill, accepting others. And each month, at my mom's school that she teaches at, they focus on one of the character education traits. So I made a video highlighting that character education trait, but connecting it to real world situations. And so, they played it every month at their morning programs that they would have or school assemblies. And as time had gone on, people were like, you can like do this for a job. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And they're like, well, you've done these things. You're talking about these skills that students need to apply every day, and I was like, "Oh, like, okay." So, I spoke at my first school officially, in my sophomore year of college, and then, like a school or 2 junior year, and then my senior year, I really tried to get going in the spring, and now that's what I'm doing. So, yeah.
Well, that's one of the things you're doing because you also have your adaptive clothesline that you talked about, and it's at Embrace, and it's em13race.com because you were number 13, right, when you played soccer?
Yes.
Yeah,
That
and it
is
looks like a B. It looks like Embrace. Talk
yeah.
about that. That's so neat. You got a patent. I know a utility patent on this clothing line that people,
Yeah.
which by the way, people should go to that website right now. But yeah, let's hear about that story.
Yeah, so I guess for the name itself, when I was coming up with names of what I would call this business, when I had initially thought of this idea my freshman year, right as I was realizing like I might not be returning to the school in the spring, I was just laying on my bed, came up with this idea of adaptive clothing, and then I was going through names, and I always thought like words with like letters that were replaced by numbers was super cool. And I knew that one day, if I did have a company, I wanted to do something like that. But I needed the numbers to be relevant and like I had to figure out what it would be that I was calling it, all of this stuff. But my number for soccer is 13. My dad told me to pick that when I first started playing soccer. I didn't know why. Alex Morgan was on the move as a player at the time. She had just made her debut for the national team. Uh, at when he had told me that, I realized that later on. But I integrated the 13 just to keep a little piece of myself in the name. So when you look close up, it looks like a 13, but from far away, it looks like a B. Just like a person with a limb difference, when you look at us close up, you can tell we look different, but from far away, you can't really tell. And the M's a little amputated on the right hand side, just like me. So that I don't know if you can see it a little bit right there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But when I had initially started um, planning out what this would become, I realized my sophomore year of college that this didn't exist and I needed protection. If I wanted to have protection for for the product, I guess.
Sure.
So I filed for a patent on in April of 2023. My patent started pending on the day my mentor had passed away. Ironic as that is.
Hmm.
Um, And then my patent was published in February 2024. So, and here we are.
Yeah,
So, long process.
congratulations.
Thank you. And uh, I learned a lot from it too. My patent lawyer is he's very like knowledgeable and helpful, and he has kids that are my age, so he did a great job, I think, too, explaining of what I needed to do and how what every step of the way was. So, uh, I learned a lot in the process too, which was awesome.
And you want to talk about the clothes a little bit too?
Yeah, so we sell adaptive clothing. So my sleeve was always too long. I'm sure you encountered the same issues at some points in your life. And I always would either hide my hand behind my back because I'd get bullied and I'd just avoid comments, sweatshirt first few weeks of college. Or just having to fold it up. And I was like, this is annoying, like this is uncomfortable. And I realized too, once I started playing soccer, that people without their legs had the same issue that we had, so I figured why not create clothes where you can just buy them fixed already and not have to do that extra step of going to a tailor or
Hmm.
doing it yourself and trying to learn how to operate these ridiculous machines because it's a lot, and so that's where I came up with it, and it's the same process as if you're checking out for any other store. The only difference is you select right or left on the side that you're missing, and then you pick your length, so shoulder, elbow, or wrist, or for the lower body, the hip, knee, or shin. The hip area, you have an option for it to be open or closed due to it being a private area, or if you have a prosthetic going that high and you need access.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
that's always been something I know with me. I don't wear t-shirts for that. I guess I'm a little opposite. I don't wear t-shirts because it's like it just advertises I have one hand. I don't know what that.
Yeah.
We all have our own little quirks, and that's mine. So you talked a little bit about how going out, in public, people do tend to stare, right? I mean, we're always on display. What has that been like for you growing up and navigating that?
I think, I was wearing, I wasn't wearing a long sleeve shirts intentionally, but, like, looking back on it now, I think I was, and I just wouldn't admit to it at the time. The email home, "Alexia is wearing the sweatshirt all day, it's very hot," like, stuff like that, but I do think that I would hide my hand, and I won't lie, I probably still do sometimes, like, if I'm just like, I'm not in the mood to this is not a petting zoo, like, show and tell, like,
Yeah.
I do think I hide I know I do still, and even though I am selling clothes, I embrace myself, like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna say that I don't do it every once in a while, but, um, again, like, I think a lot of people in the area knew, like, I had one hand, like, no one said anything, and when I got to college, a lot of people hadn't come from communities where they would see a difference, and,
Yeah.
you can't blame them for that either because that's just how life is, but yeah, so
Well, if more
definitely
people want to learn about Embrace and your clothing line, and certainly to book you as a speaker, it's em13race.com, embrace.com. So please go there, Alexia Michitti. I want to make sure I'm
yes.
saying that right. So, a couple other questions I wanted to ask you about. Like, let's say there's a parents that are listening to this episode, just happen to be listening to this episode, and they find themselves with a child with limb difference. You talked a little bit about your parents' perspective and what they taught you. What would you tell them if you had the opportunity, which I know you do when you speak, but what do you like to tell people if they find themselves with a child with limb difference?
I think my biggest thing that my parents did for me that I tell parents if they're asking me for input or anything on having a kid with limb difference is, don't underestimate what they're capable of. Don't shut it down before you can see, if you see your kid struggling, like I know for my parents, like it stinks to see your kid struggle,
Yeah.
whether it's doing a physical task or like I know in high school, like getting bullied, like, my mom would be concerned, and I could tell she was, just, kids are mean, and I think having your kid figure it out whether, still supportively, but figuring it out until there's a point where you're like, "Alright, I need to step in now," but giving them that moment to figure it out because I know for me, when I did have those breakthroughs of, like, I did it, it's like, yes, but, like, be their cheerleader along the way and clap for them in those moments of success. And although it may be hard to watch them struggle a little bit, just know that you're just helping them in the long run.
And what
So
about people like us? You grew up, and what were some of the keys that you always thought about as you were growing up through, but wherever you want to go back to, say junior high, high school, and college, that you leaned on in your thought process that you got you through?
I think for me, I know a goal for me since like late middle school, early high school was, there was the few people you could look up to that looked like me and you growing up. For me, it was Jim Abbott and Bethany Hamilton were like the two big people. And I did get to meet Jim, which was super cool when I was young. But they weren't necessarily people who could just be like, hey, let me ask you about this, like a connection, and I wanted to be someone I knew when I got older that people could look up to, connect with, talk with, ask me the ridiculous, but they're not really ridiculous questions. How do you put an earring in? Like I figured it out and I could tell you now,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I think that's what kept me motivated throughout the whole time is I didn't know what I wanted to do. It changed a lot as I had gone through high school and even college of what the end goal was, but I knew at the end of the day, I still wanted to be a connection for people and I guess like a role model or
hmm
someone you could look up to in this community. And I'm still trying to do that the
Well,
best
you're
that I can.
definitely more than on your way. One of the questions I always used to get, I didn't care about was like tearing apart an engine, something difficult. How do you tie your shoes? It was always that one. How do you tie
Oh,
your shoes?
yeah.
How do you tie your shoes? Like, very well, thank you. That's
Yeah.
all good. As you look forward now and all the things that you've gone through in your life, you got a great company, great speaking career. What are you looking forward to, let's say, in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think just seeing how many people I can connect with, no matter what setting that is, whether it's at schools, a couple weeks ago, I was able to speak to over 1,000 students in a day and a half, which, sometimes I don't know how these students are taking the messages, but, getting messages like, "Hey, my students were talking about you for the rest of the week, the day," hearing that
Yes.
is something nice to hear, and I'm hoping to just keep sharing my experiences in a positive way and to just tell people in general too, you don't know the power of an idea and the way it can make an impact on others because I had this idea that I wrote down my freshman year of college and now it's my job. And I had no idea that's what it would turn into, but just kind of enforcing that as well. Just you never know what something could turn into one day. I think for the next 5 to 10 years, just seeing what I'm able to do with Embrace and who I'm able to speak to and connect with, I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most, so, yeah.
Very well said. Just one last reminder who I'm talking to. Alexia Michitti, she can be found at em13race.com, embrace.com. That's an adaptive clothing line. Plus, if you want to hire her to be a speaker, I'm sure she'd be more than happy to talk to you about that, actually, because she's doing it to thousands of people now, which is great. Alexia, thank you so much for being a guest on the We're Not Stumped podcast. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Well, here we are at the end of another great podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I bet you're wondering, gosh, I'd like to be on that podcast. I wonder if Mike would like to have me on. Well, why don't you go to we'renotstumped.com, go to guest inquiries. You can find out everything you need to know about being a guest on this podcast. I would love to have you on. And by the way, if you made it this far, if you went down this far to this point of the We're Not Stumped podcast, do me a favor. Like, share, and subscribe. Especially share it. Come on, you got friends. You got at least one friend. You have as many friends as I have hands, so you have one friend. Please share this podcast. Thank you.